Welcome back to the Flex a Diet podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike T. Nelson. We're on the podcast. We talk all about things you can do to increase performance, body composition, add some lean muscle, and all without destroying your health in the process. Today on the program, my buddy Travis Mash, we talk all about athlete monitoring and much more. So he shares his background, how he's actually going back to school right now. He's about halfway through a Ph.D. and he's 48. So he's an older person like me. We're actually almost the same age, actually. We talked about, is it different to go back to school once you're older? Kind of what his research will be, which will be athlete monitoring. Some other side tangents, the work of Dr. Keith Barr looking at collagen and isometrics. Travis shares some very interesting stuff that he did with isometrics with his athletes. And then we get into athlete monitoring, everything from heart rate variability, which you've heard me talk a lot about, something called RSI, reactive strength index, that he uses to measure his athletes both acutely and then also chronically, velocity-based training, VBT, and many others. We also chat along the way about the effect of NSAIDs potentially on muscle growth. He was asking me about protocols I've used for cold water and heat. So I kind of break down the model that I use from the PhysFlex cert on that. And at the end, we even talk about flywheel training. So I recently purchased a flywheel device from Eccentrics, K-Box, and I really like it. And it's a way, I think, to use velocity in your training, even if you are not doing Olympic weightlifting. So again, even if you're listening to this and you're not an Olympic weightlifter, I still think there's a lot of practical things you can take out and apply to your training. And if you are working with higher level athletes, then Travis breaks down all the little indicators and things that he uses to monitor them over time. So today's program is brought to you by the Physiologic Flexibility Certification. The PhysFlex cert will open up again in early April of 2022, depending upon when you are listening to this. And in that certification, I break down the 4 homeostatic regulators. These are areas that you would need to train in order to be much harder to kill, increase recovery, and robustness of your body. So once you have the basics of good nutrition and movement down and sleep, such as taught in the Flex Diet cert, this to me is the next level that will allow you to recover faster, and I also believe increase your longevity at the same time. So the 4 homeostatic regulators are going to be temperature, pH, fuels, and air, oxygen and CO2. And in the cert, we have the same format as the Flex Diet cert. So there's going to be 8 interventions, right? So for temperature, you can have either a high temperature, such as a sauna, or exercise in the heat, and then a cold temperature, such as cold water immersion, which I'm getting ready to do here after my cardio today. And at the end, you'll understand the 4 homeostatic regulators. You'll learn the idea of physiologic flexibility, what it is as a concept. And then I also provide 40 specific action items and a full system for you to figure out what to do with yourself or your athletes. One of the problems right now is that these areas are becoming quite sexy and there's more talk about them, which is awesome, but it's extremely confusing. Should you use hot? Should you use cold? Like, at what point should I do different breathing techniques? Should I add intervals or do, long, slow distance training, right? Because if I work on intervals, so faster pace, that is something that is potentially changing your pH, as you are literally dumping acid, hydrogen ions, into the muscle. So we go through all of that and break it down into a system that you can apply to yourself and your clients so that you know exactly what to use at the right time. So go to physiologicflexibility.com. If this is not open when you're listening to this, you'll still be able to get onto the wait list there. So you'll have all the information available to you once it is open or opens again. So sit back and grab some coffee, get your neurons firing, and listen to my chat here with Travis Mash of Mash Elite. Hey, welcome back to the Flex Diet podcast. And I actually have a formal intro this week, which is kind of crazy. The last two guests we just started talking. So yeah, I'm here with Coach Travis Mash. So say hello.
Hey man, I'm very excited. I always talk to you and then obviously to your listeners.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I'm super excited to talk to you. We'll probably get into a little bit about the Ph.D. process and some athlete monitoring, from heart rate variability to a whole bunch of other stuff. And the great part about you is that you actually have data on like high level athletes, not just the people and grad students that you just shoved into a lab just to do measurements to see what the hell happens.
that was the whole point. Like, yes, I wanted to do this research on, the athletes I work with, because, it's a big difference in regular people and then people who are at the elite level. So, yeah.
Yeah. And just in case people are living under a rock and don't know anything about you, give us a little bit of background on what you've been doing. You've been coaching for quite a while, and you've got some super heavy, impressive lifts and maybe a former life or a few years back.
Former life, it seems, right? But I played football at Appalachian State University, and that's where I was introduced to exercise science. And I also was lucky enough to have an amazing strength coach, because this was like 91 to 95, which strength conditioning was just kind of like, becoming popular. And I had Mike Kent, who's still, he was at Florida, University of Florida until just a few years ago, but he was incredible. And it was, of the whole experience at Appalachian, that was the greatest, because I got to see what great strength conditioning athletic performance can do. Like, for example, we had an athlete, Matt Stevens, who was a walk-on at Appalachian, and he was 176 pounds, 6'1", and ran a 4.740, and had his vertical was like maybe 28. So he was like average at best, And, but he moved well, and he had a lot of skills that he was good at. But that guy, when he graduated, I'm pretty sure he was drafted in the second round of the NFL, but he was 215 pounds, ran a 4.4 40-yard dash. And that was laser, because it was the NFL combine, and his vertical leap was 38 inches. It was like, wow. It was a transformation. And so then I was fascinated. And I saw it. There was a bunch of us. It's just he had the biggest, he was like a miracle. And so that's what got me intrigued. Anyway, then I went to, when I graduated, I went straight to Colorado Springs. I got a coach in Olympic weightlifting, and that was Wes Barnett, two-time Olympian. A year later, I was invited to the Olympic Training Center. So now I was doing weightlifting. And then I had a father get sick. Almost done with the story. I'm not going to drag it on too much more, but
no, you're good.
I had a father who got sick in North Carolina. I moved back home. Back then, there wasn't CrossFit, so there wasn't weightlifting on every corner. So I started powerlifting. That was like 2001, and then by the time it was like 2004, I was a world champion in powerlifter. I won the world championships 3 times. Broke several world records. I don't know. I'm not quite sure how many, but it was the all-time total was my favorite though at 220. Anyway, so then
what was your total at 220?
2414.
What was it you said? You cut out there.
2,414. 2414. Yeah. That was, I beat Ed Cohen's all-time world record, and so that was the goal, and I did it. However, when we went one-on-one, he beat me. So he's the greatest for a reason. But anyway,
that's awesome.
Almost done. And then through all of that, I was coaching athletes. In 1996, Jenny Driscoll, she was a volleyball player. She was my very first athletic performance client. But then when I was in Colorado, I was coaching and training the whole time. I got to work with pro boxers. I got to work with some ice skaters, because the World Arena was right there. So I had a big experience. I got to meet Charles Pulligan. I got to meet the great chiropractor. Oh, Dr. Mike Leahy, the guy who invented athletic.
ART.
Yeah. And so it was just a great learning experience. The dudes at T Nation magazine, you probably know them.
Yeah, right down the road.
Yeah, right. So they were all like right there. And then so then I've been coaching athletes since, and somehow around 2012, I started getting back into coaching weightlifting. And then I got the chance to work with Muscle Driver USA as a professional weightlifting coach. And so then somehow, some way I started being this weightlifting coach. So here we are. Yeah, and then now I'm back in school. So working on Ph.D. So there we go.
Why did you go back to school for a Ph.D.? I mean, I always think it's interesting as an older student going back. I mean, I graduated with my Ph.D. when I was 38, 39, I think. Right. I'm losing track of time now, but
I think you said 38.
Yeah,
you mummy, yeah.
Yeah, how is it different going back at your age? Because you're in your mid 40s now, correct?
I'm 48, so
I'm
approaching 50. Yeah. So I feel like I'm a much better student now. I mean, I was always a pretty good student, but I have a mother who was demanding on me, and that was good, thank God. And so I feel like school, I love it, so when I'm taking biomechanics, I love it. And so I'm not just taking the class, like I'm applying it right away. And that's a huge advantage. So when I learn about a moment arm, I'm going straight to the weight room and I'm like figuring that out more specifically, so that's a big difference. And physiology, like everything I'm learning, I'm applying immediately. Like right now, this semester, I'm really working on a deeper dive into sports psychology. And like, it has been I tell you what, man, in these first few weeks of this semester, I feel like I've improved the most of my entire life as a coach, just because of like really thinking about the things that I'm doing and saying, expressions on my face, seeing how my athlete responds. It's been a huge improvement. So I wanted to go back to school because I did not want to be, there's in our world, you have the people like you, PhD, you're brilliant, you coach people, you're working with clients. And so you have that. And then there's people who are these great athletes and they have a voice. That's okay. And then you have people who are just a coach, they coach several athletes and they have a voice. And so I wanted to bridge the worlds and so we could understand each other better. Like I've been the great athlete, I've coached great athletes, and now I'm trying to get in your world as in academia. And so I can like bridge the gap, I feel.
No, I think that's great because even when I went back to school, it was interesting, especially being done, that I think all the interesting stuff now is all in the overlaps, right? It's in the overlap of coaching or physiology, of muscle phys and neurology, or the psychology aspect. There's all these overlaps that I think are like the next interesting area. And everyone talks about it and they're like, oh yeah, we have to, mind the gap and fill in these things. But there's not many people that do it. And after I kind of been in a little bit of both of those worlds, I kind of understand why. Because like from the research side, like I don't do research full time now. I help out with some papers, some things I'm interested here and there. So to hardcore researchers, they're like, you haven't published enough papers as first author. What are you doing? And then to like hardcore coaches, it's like, oh, but you don't coach. You're not in the gym, 60 hours a week, like bleeding through your eyeballs.
Right.
But I'm like, I'm not trying to do either one of those 100%. I'm trying to look at the interactions between the two. So it's a thing that's definitely needed, but from the standard, how it's been done for so long, you get lots of hate mail from both sides.
Agree, man. I feel like, I will write something about velocity-based training, and then there'll be a coach that will be like, oh, you don't need velocity-based training.
Yeah. What are you doing with all that tech stuff, man? Come on, just watch it. What are you doing?
Right. And they'll be like, you guys, all you do is track and you don't know how to use it. I'm like, son, you come to my gym and I'll show you how we track and use it. Like that's the point. What it is, is that these people are afraid. I mean, I get it. You're in the gym all the time, you're coaching hundreds of athletes, and like the thought of like learning a whole new subject area, like HRV or velocity-based training or flywheel training, it freaks you out. You're like, man, I don't have time to sit down at nighttime and try to figure this whole new thing out. So the goal I have is to be able to simplify it for them, because like, at the base of velocity-based training, it's not very complicated. It's very easy to understand, and I can implement it in no time at all. And I can make that easy on them. So like, if they don't freak out on me and just, block it without even considering it, I'll make that transition and that learning process easier. At least that's my goal, which is something you do very well at as well in the nutrition world.
Do you find that the students there, like I noticed this when I went to grad school, like the two things I got wrong, I thought, one, oh, this is going to be so amazing. Like I'm going to sit down and have like these super in-depth, conversations about detailed stuff with my advisor, and all the people are going to be working on the same projects. And that like never happened. Like I had those conversations, but it was not with people in my department. And it was also interesting how divorced it was from any application. Right. So the running joke is, students are coming into the lab. It was like me and two other Ph.D. students. If it was anything remotely applied, like the easiest question, they'd all like point at me and go, I don't know, just ask him. I'm like, you're getting a freaking Ph.D. and this is the exercise physiology department. You're a smart person. You understand stuff. But then you realize that like they don't have to apply any of it. They're going to do, muscle atrophy researching and cancer or whatever. Definitely 100% needed. I'm not saying they shouldn't study that. But it was just weird at even like the highest level how divorced a lot of application was from it, which was kind of shocking to me.
I find that a lot. Luckily, there's two professors that are, they seem to be like very frequent. They're my professors. So I have Dr. Keith Lighting, who's, really big expert in biomechanics and athlete monitoring, something we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
So we've become the best friends. And so literally, I actually had a different advisor, but the more we got to know each other, he literally just took that role over. Like I didn't even ask for it. And then Dr. Cook, who was my original advisor and the one who helped me start the weightlifting program at Lenore Ryan University, he is more of the physiologist, so like he's done a lot of research on hypertrophy. So, and both of them love sport performance, and especially they love weightlifting, so they've really helped me to implement it. So anytime they have any idea, they call me and we figure it out with my athletes. And so I've been very blessed at this university in particular to be somewhere where the professor, the head of the department is Dr. Cook. So like, he loves athletic performance. So I've had a good experience. I got lucky.
Yeah, that's awesome. I always throw that caveat out because I think people listening to this, especially a lot of up and coming coaches, it's become, I don't know, lack of a better word, trendy to get more advanced degrees now. And again, I'm not trying to, talk people out of an advanced degree, but a little bit of a warning of like, the department you're in is amazing. Right. Like the department I was in, I literally sat down and asked my advisor once, I said, why are you in the exercise physiology department? Because you don't give a shit about performance at all. And he's like, I just use exercise to push variables around in the body. And I'm like, okay, that's valid. But I'm like, I just never thought of it because I'm always like, well, how does it performance? How does it affect function? Right. So a caveat for people listening.
Me too.
Make sure to ask the department, what do they enjoy? What research have they published to make sure that it's a good fit for you, or your life's going to be hell.
Yeah, totally. And there are several departments out there,
it's getting much better.
There's a few out there who are like, sport performance minded. And now there's one. We talked to a gentleman somewhere up north who they're starting an online university that's all geared towards like actual performance implementation. So that should be cool. So, which is one of the things I want to do too, by the way, in the future.
Yeah. And I think that's great. Like there are those departments you can find, my buddy, Dr. Bill Campbell runs a whole lab that's just looking at high-end athletic performance and body comp in primarily physique athletes, so there are these little niche areas out there that you can still find, which is great.
Yeah. Have you ever talked to Dr. Keith Barr? Like, he's the tendon guy.
Yeah.
Like I love talking to that dude. And I think his advantage is he started out as a strength coach and a PE teacher.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. I'm like, how is that guy a PE teacher? But so he is really good at implementation, and here's how you could use it, and giving you like guidelines. And then there's lots of things you can, as a practitioner, a lot of ways you can run with it.
Yeah. And he also consults with some pretty high level, athletes and that kind of stuff too. And it's funny though, like I talked to Stu Phillips about that too. And Stu's a great guy, and Stu and Keith are good friends, but he was kind of in a nice way giving him shit about his models were, there's only a limit of them and all that kind of stuff. And he was very frank with what the research is. But as you know, like if you're looking at soft tendons, you're looking at, or soft tissue, no one's going to allow you to biopsy their ACL in a human.
No
right.
chance.
So,
right.
And Stu was just doing it more in jest because they know each other and that kind of stuff. But it's always interesting to me how it's easy to be a critic until you understand what the limits of that model are and what you can actually do. Right. So I can read Keith Barr's research and say, wow, a lot of it's animal data, it's anecdotal. They did some stuff in athletes. Like, where's the tissue biopsy of the data to show that it's actually better? That's like, okay, you're really going to biopsy someone's ACL, especially a high level athlete. Yeah, good luck with all that.
Exactly. Well, I have now at least, a semester's worth of data on our athletes. What we did is we implemented a lot of his like principles. Like, for example, like he would tell you that the 2 ways to change the tendon tissue in a way that's advantageous to an athlete would be isometrics would help thicken it. And then like the bounding will help the matrix form. And so we implemented in our warm-ups every single day, we've implemented certain specific isometric work and where it's concerning a weightlifter. And we've implemented bounding in the form of simply just jump rope we do. And we've had a dramatic increase in vertical leaps, in our athlete. It's been crazy. Like a kid just jumped last semester. He jumped 34.5 inches. This semester, 41 inches. He's gained and he's gained weight. And so it's not like he's like leaned up, which, you can do. No, he's gained weight. It was, I couldn't believe it. So, and it wasn't a fluke. Like he did 41 one day. So I tested him the next day. He got 40, 40.5, and it's like insane. Anyway, so there's that anecdotal evidence and with the data. So I don't know. So we'll see.
Now, is that just using his training recommendations, right? So let me know if I oversimplified this too much. If you've got an athlete who's very strong but not very springy, maybe they should do more springy type training, or vice versa. If someone's a little bit too springy, maybe they just need to get stronger, right? You could use like a RSI or reactive strength index to maybe try to quantify that. I don't know if that's what you did in that case.
That's exactly what we did.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So yeah.
And have you been able to provide any collagen or anything like that to see if there's any additional nutritional effects on that?
No, but next phase will be that very thing. And so, probably next semester, I will add that, because if you do it all, it's hard to tell what.
Yeah, you don't know what's what.
Right. So this semester we simply implemented the isometric work and the bounding, and it was a dramatic. Nothing else changed. Now here too, let me throw this caveat. That same, and by the way, every single one of the athletes improved, and we did zero plyometrics. Now we're weightlifters, so by nature, what we do is similar, and it's explosive. But this kid has been with me since he was 10. It's 12 years. So I've been the only one that's ever trained this kid. So nothing changed other than an addition of the isometrics and the bounding. That's it. So
yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah.
And if you are able to do a nutritional intervention, would you be able to do one of them as a placebo, like taste matched control?
Totally. Yeah, I can easily do that. Yeah, and I could do it with like, what I could do. I only have, when it comes to weightlifting, I have about 25 athletes. But in the school, the strength and conditioning room, I could gather hundreds. So like I have the ability to do whatever I want to do, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that day would be great because I've read Keith's stuff years ago and I started using it on, a fair amount of the athletes, especially before they're like heavier, more, lack of a better word, tissue intensive type, days. And again, completely anecdotal. There's a whole bunch of other factors, but it seems to help, right? Because I'm like, what's the negative downside? They're already getting enough protein, so muscle recovery is going to be fine. Right. So we're adding, 15 grams of collagen, a little bit of vitamin C, 40 to 60 minutes before they train. Like if it doesn't do anything, there's no negative side effect other than a little bit of cost and a little bit of a pain in the ass on their aspect too.
Let me ask you, when it comes to collagen, like, is there a brand or what would you recommend if we took that next step?
I've been using the Great Lakes one. I've used Vital Proteins. I've talked to those guys a fair amount. Those are the two I've primarily only used. There's no data on it, but I get more nervous on things that I know are going to be part of your physical structure in terms of quality. Right? Like vitamin C, ascorbic acid, like it's so mass produced, it's almost the same everywhere. Yeah, you use it, you kind of piss out a fair amount of it. But like collagen, fish oil, like some things that become like literally part of your structure, I'm like, I don't have any data to prove it, but I'll pay the extra $10 a container and buy something I know is pretty high quality. And I'm probably not getting much of their crap in there too.
Yeah, which is for us is ultra important. USADA
for testing.
Right. I can't afford some BS like that. How much vitamin C? So 15 grams of the collagen every single day. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So it's 10 to 15 grams. The studies that were done used 15 grams. They did it about 40 to 60 minutes before exercise. If you talk to Keith, like the vitamin C, he's not even sure if that makes any difference. It was a super small amount, like 30 milligrams or something like that. It was like a tiny amount, but the hard part is they did it with the initial studies, right? So if you change anything from the initial studies, someone could come out and say, "Oh, it was a vitamin C, you idiot. Why didn't you put it in?"
Right. So I will definitely implement that now and see if there's a further increase. If it is, it'll be insane because 41 is the highest. It's the high. And now when I say vertical leap, there's no step. Literally,
that's static, right? Just Vertec or whatever you're using.
Or no, we use the jump mat. I think cool. The Vertec is so like, I can make alterations and
you can cheat. Hey, coach, I'm at the top. Like, sure you are.
Right. Literally, I made a career out of teaching people how to cheat that. So I don't want to use the Vertec. And so, yeah, the jump mat seems to work really well. We test there. You'll dig this because this will segment into the athlete testing. Like we teach the RSI every day. We do a 45 centimeter depth jump, and with the jump mat. Anyone who doesn't know, it's what you do is you take the height of the jump and divide it by the ground contact time, which gives you a correlate or gives you a number to compare to other people. And so I just use a T-score to compare everybody. I see who's in the top of the RSI scores and who's in the bottom. Then I draw correlations between improvement, and the results have been really cool. Which I'll be presenting soon.
So you're using an RSI score then to auto-regulate their training for that day, or is it a long-term marker, or is it both?
All the above. So every single day they come in and they do a subjective questionnaire. That we're going to look at like fatigue and stress outside of the weight room, because for all that don't know, there's a whole lot of stress other than what I'm prescribing, and stress is stress. As anyone who knows anything about homeostasis, like if I put stress on the body in the form of like a girlfriend breaks up with you, it could be worse than a 10 by 10 German volume squat session. And so we implement, and so they do the subjective questionnaire. They do we do it after we warm up. We have that Keith Barr. Well, he didn't do the warm up for me, but it is influenced. Then we go directly into they write their daily goal on a bar on the board, so I can see becomes reality. We can encourage everyone based on this their subjective goal for the day, and then we test their 45 centimeter depth jump, and then the third, just because I wanted to compare the three, is then we take 85% of whatever movement is first, whether it's a snatch, clean and jerk, a squat, pull, whatever it is, and we look at 85% on an ongoing basis, and that starts to develop. This is their average, and if they're 10% above or below, we make changes. So if it's a 10% drop, the normal. I took Brian Mann's suggestions, and what we do is some very light metabolic stress bodybuilding and send them home and get them recovered. So
that's like a 1x20 or just like old school, just get a pump and leave.
Literally, it's old school, get a pump and leave, trying to do stuff that's not a whole lot of like, muscle damage, but mainly just metabolic stress. I think I've even thought about just doing some like, the blood flow restriction.
Yeah, you could do BFR, blood flow restriction.
Yeah, and like you're trying to do is encourage the hormonal response that might help with the whole recovery process. I have no data to back that up, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you think part of recovery, this is like the old school Soviet stuff too, that recovery is just blood flow? I mean, they were preaching that stuff for decades. And in the West, we're kind of like, I don't know, there's no data to support it. But like, you talk to like every high level coach I've ever talked to, like almost all the recovery metrics for the most part, like they kind of center around like just getting more blood flow into the tissue that's having issues.
Right. First I would say nutrition and sleep.
Yeah. Assuming you have the basics done, but like what you would do in a session. Yeah.
Right. What I would do is like, we would increase blood flow, maybe, change what are your thoughts? This is more your world, but what about the contrast training, the hot, cold, or nowadays everyone's into cold, but there's like a split, some people say absolutely not. Some people say,
yeah. So I would, so what I do with athletes is even just general population is I imagine like, so I use a barbell model. And if you have no experience to cold, you have no experience to heat, and you've got access to both, right? So it's not an access issue. I'm like, okay, what are your goals? To me, like heat has almost no downside, where cold water potentially has more of a downside.
Right.
So I would start them on heat and just like get in the sauna, get warm, don't push yourself crazy, drink some fluid, do some relaxing breathing, and then just watch the temperature and then the time that they're in there. And I'll just run those adaptations, right? Just like scaling lifting, right? Going to go a little higher temperature, going to go a little bit longer. Once you start getting to 20, 30 minutes, you probably want to bump the temperature back up, go back down, scale that up for 4, 6, 8 weeks. And then if you want to go further, then I would leave that adaptation kind of on hold. So maybe you do it 1-2 sessions a week, and then maybe you do some cold water immersion. So I would do that up to their chin. I just had people start at 50 degrees for 30 seconds. So pretty easy. It still feels cold. Like if you've ever gotten 50-degree water, it's not warm. People are kind of hyper worried about the effect on muscle mass. But if you look at like the 4 studies that have been done on them, most of them are from Norway. It's about 50 degrees Fahrenheit for at least 10 minutes. And then it has to be done immediately after training. And I went through for the Phys Flex cert, and I must have spent months trying to figure out like, okay, in English, what does this mean? Right? If I'm Joe Burrow meathead and I'm like, I'm going to do cold water for 50 degrees for 10 minutes after all my hypertrophy sessions, like how much mass out of what I could potentially accumulate, like what does that cost me? Right. So if my mythical, like the maximal rate of gain is like a pound per month, which for advanced athletes is probably way too high. Right. Is a cold water immersion costing me half a pound, a quarter of a pound, a third of a pound? And the answer is I don't know, because all the data is mixed, right? You're looking at muscle fiber changes. There was one study that did do DEXA, but the air within the DEXA doesn't really allow you to figure out what the amount would really be because of the air bars. And so it does appear to be a real thing, but unless you're all out maximal hypertrophy, I don't think you need to worry about it. So I'd have people do cold, work up to, probably down to 40 degrees. Once you get to about 5 or 6 minutes at that temperature easily, then drop the temp and go again. So I'd have them do cold for another 4 to 8 weeks. So once they're good at cold, their heat is still kind of good. Then I would have them do contrast. So then I would have them do hot and then a little bit of cold and then back and forth.
Oh, cool. I like that.
Because I think that is the biggest stressor. And it has so many unknowns, you can't troubleshoot it, right? Like how long were you in the hot? Well, how did it feel? What was the temperature? What was the duration? Okay, how long before now you got in the cold? What was the temp? What was the duration? You've got so many moving variables that if it doesn't work, you're like, shit, I don't know.
I don't know.
If it works, then you don't worry about it, right?
Right. This is brilliant. I've never heard of anyone talk in terms of like, so you're basically talking like I would talk prescribing, volume.
Yeah.
This is great. I mean,
because it's a stressor, right?
Sure.
You're putting a stressor on the system. And that's what people forget is that, it does cause some beneficial things, but that's after the fact again. Like I've seen people just crush themselves in the sauna and their performance in HRV just get worse.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen people do it with cold water too. They're just like, man, I'm going to suffer through it. I heard that you got to shiver to motivate fat loss. And I'm doing 10 rounds of Wim Hof before I get in a super ventilation method. And their HRV is just CrossFit athletes. Their HRV is just tanking. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, we didn't change your training. And they're like, oh, I added all these recovery metrics. I'm like, but your recovery is so stressful. You're getting worse, not better. And then once we pulled everything back, they're like, oh yeah, now I do feel better.
Yeah. I mean, athletes in general, especially high level, are so obsessive in nature. We do have to be careful of what we tell them. Like if we're going to tell them, you know, recovery ice is good, if that's what we think, you got to be very careful. Or like, you know, like someone's trying to be a world champion, they're going to be like, they're going to do a polar plunge right out of the gate, you know? And so if they're like, oh, if that's good, if this is good, I'll go do this thing, it's better. And it's not. So with your take on ice is like, maybe it is good. You know, have you talked to Aaron Horsley, Scott University? I don't know if you've
no, I just got his name the other day. We are trying to get him on Iron Radio actually. So
that's my boy. And so like,
cool.
He's such a great guy. Now he was actually one of the guest instructors at my university in my master's program.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And he said he presented a study that really crushed ice, you know, said like, you know, because it like hinders like the macrophage response. And so, which is, you know, this, when you work out, you damage your muscles and the response is how you get more muscle. But he said you would actually, not only would you slow it down, and in certain phases, you might completely eliminate the recovery. Which you
can. So the studies on that are some of the more mechanistic studies.
Yeah.
It doesn't appear to affect inflammation from the studies that I've read, but some of the other immune stuff definitely changes. The caveat is that most of those studies weren't necessarily paired with a performance or a body comp aspect. And if they were, it's just kind of like things kind of moving in the same direction. Right. So I would agree with that. But then in my head, I always think about like the data on NSAIDs and muscle, right? So data on NSAIDs and muscle in mice was like, holy shit, this stuff just completely abolishes it. Like, you should never do this. And then the studies in human, like, you know, Dr. Scott Trappy did one of the early studies in older humans with NSAIDs, Advil. And they're like, oh, son of a bitch, this is like mildly anabolic. They're like, we fucked up the study. Like, they thought they completely screwed it up. And luckily they had to have people have themselves film taking the Advil. So they thought their compliance was shit. Turns out the compliance was amazing. And now the new theory is, well, maybe in lifters, maybe it's not as detrimental as we think. We're not 100% sure. But in older people, because you're modifying inflammation to a more positive direction, that it's mildly anabolic in old people. Wow. So it's one of these things where like you're looking at acute responses, but you don't know what the rest of that curve looks like. And if you think about how intense lifting and performance is, like if your body didn't adapt to that, we would be so screwed. Right. Yeah. So I think that's just such a robust adaptation that it's almost impossible to drive it to zero. Now, if you're trained high-level athletes, could you do things to erode 5, 10%, 20%? Yeah, sure. Of course you can. And then you're screwed too. Yeah. But I think the general population perspective is, oh my God, I took 3 Advil, I lost all my gains. Like, no, bro, I think you're going to be fine.
As a former world champion, I'm positive you're fine, because like,
and you talk to high-level people who take a shit ton.
Like, I mean, I should not have a liver, you know, of all the, you know, if I think about all the ibuprofen I've taken as an athlete, which now I don't take any, but as an athlete, but you got to remember, like, it shifted, you know, my brain's perception of pain, which if you've read the book Endure, which cites,
love that book.
Me too.
So awesome.
Exactly. Shout out to Endure. But it shows, it sheds light on the brain's responsibility, which I do believe in studies is neglected when it comes to fatigue. And so like, if there's no pain, your brain is going to be way more open to more volume, more intensity, you know, but if you're hurting, your brain is going to shut that down. I think, you know, I would love for some people to do higher level studies about the brain's responsibility to, you know, fatigue. I think it's hard to explain that one, I believe.
Yeah, they did some old studies on endurance athletes looking at caffeine and aspirin and placebo.
I saw,
And what they found was at a high enough dose, it appears that aspirin is ergogenic. And if you think about endurance athletes, right, that's just high level pain management for freaking hours.
That's what
right?
it is.
Like I do some rowing with athletes and they're like, I don't understand. Like I've cut 30 seconds off my 2K time in the past year, but every time I do a max 2K, it still sucks. I'm like, yeah. It's always going to suck. Like you're never going to get to that point where you're pushing as hard as you can on something and it's not going to suck. It's going to suck.
Yeah. Always. It's just like how much your brain can, withstand that. That's a big key. Is like, they talk in the book, it talks about the free divers, the guys who are like, I mean, it's insane. I feel like that is the part of sports performance that we have the most to gain is a deeper dive into the brain and one's ability to get used to that, what you just said, the suck. It's going to suck. And it's your brain's ability to get used to that and not shut you down. That's a big key.
Yeah. And I've noticed that too. Like if I go away from rowing for a while and I come back, like even if I've done other things to keep my performance kind of about where it should be by all my other markers, like I can tell I don't have the mental practice of it sucking for 7 minutes. You know what I mean? Like I can feel literally I'm out of mental practice because I'm trying so hard to stay focused and not get distracted, where I think you do get used to that at a point where like you're almost kind of looking for it and you kind of know what to expect and you've been there, and it does become more practice, just like anything else, right?
An adaptation to the brain's perception of shit, hell.
Yeah.
That's being a great athlete, especially endurance athletes. Those dudes are crazy.
Yeah, that's just a whole another world.
I share an office with the school's triathlon coach, which I remember when they first put me in this office. I was like, you can put me with the triathlon coach. and like, I had this higher perception of who I am too. I'm like, this dude's not going to know anything. And then we are the best of friends. His approach to triathlon is so intense. It makes me want to be a triathlon coach because of the way they will preview the course, and then they'll watch the video. They'll actually do inside rides while they're watching the course that they're about to go to. It's so in depth. I mean, anyway, the guy and I, that's why I read the book Endure, because I became buddies. So I have a newfound respect for endurance training.
Yeah, I think at a high level, it's not that dissimilar. I mean, obviously the modalities are different, but you're dealing with the same thing, right? So I've only coached just a couple mediocre triathlon athletes, and one of them was like years ago. He had 8 weeks before his event, and I was like, okay, your swim kind of sucks. Let's not worry about it. I want you every day to practice your transitions. And he's like, what the hell's wrong with you? He's like, I hired you to get better at this thing. I'm like, no, we'll still do biking. We'll still do all the other stuff. But the only goals we're really going to make at this point are making sure you're well fed, making sure your nutrition is good, making sure you sleep, making sure your mechanical efficiency is better, right? We'll do whatever we can to change your nervous system. And then you practice your transitions, because you're not going to become an elite swimmer in 8 weeks. Even if you had the best swimming coach, you're probably not going to see that big of a time difference. But a transition is something you can practice all the time. Right. Whenever I go to like triathletes, I just stand there and watch the transitions, and you see like the pros who have everything completely dialed from shoe position to they've done it. Like you'll see something get messed up and you'll see them not go off track, and they're boom, they got it dialed. And then everyone else just stumbles in there and it's just a clusterfuck for like sometimes like minutes. And you're going, oh my God, like the amount of training to make up, say 30 seconds you would have to do at a high level for something you could just practice, So a lot of it I think is just troubleshooting. Like you're looking at Olympic weightlifters, with technique and other things you can change. Right. Like the thought processes are similar from a problem solving standpoint. It's just your modalities are completely different.
Right. I hear him have very similar conversations with his athletes. It's just a little bit different in the modality. Totally. So we're all out trying to get the best athlete. He's got two. I have a few that are considered Olympic hopefuls. with one being like he should definitely make it. And he's got two that will be Olympic hopefuls for the next Olympics. So we have some really good conversations, especially for a small school. And we got good athletes. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so for athlete monitoring, what are you guys primarily using? I know you've done some stuff with heart rate variability, obviously velocity-based training. Like, what does that kind of look like?
Well, we do. The key is like, which I'll bring it back, but the key will be how you track all this. I'm about to tell you. But so the first step, they come in and they do their subjective questionnaire, which looks at sleep, looks at nutrition, and for the better athletes, we look at that way more, like not subjectively, but objectively. So we look at they track their macros, and they wear the Whoop for their sleep. So I get more specific. So it just depends. If someone's brand new in the sport, there's no point in getting that in depth. So, but anyway, so we track that. We ask them questions such as like, on a scale from 1 to 5, 5 being that I'm in hell, like stress levels outside of the gym. And then there's stress, there's fatigue, there's like, is there any event that's not common, such as like arguments with the spouse or girlfriend in these guys' cases, a death in the family. So anyway, so what that tells me really with subjective data, I really don't look at it until they do their, after the warm up, we go immediately and they do the depth jump from 45 centimeters. And then they do they use velocity for everything. But in terms of data monitoring, athlete monitoring, we look at 85% on whichever exercise is first. So if it's snatch, clean and jerk, squatting, whatever, we look at 85%. And over time, we develop, their average. And then if I see a 10% dip, then I'm going to immediately go look at the subjective questionnaire, figure out the why. Then I'm going to talk to the person. I'm going to gather my information, then talk to them and see if I can be of help in any way. But we track that. We look at, the key would be, we have a really good, now I have Bridge Athletic. It's kind of my software that I use that collects all that. They are integrated with GymAware, which is the company we use for velocity-based training. And so it all gets like funneled to one place, all the subjective questionnaire data, everything. And then I can look at trends and develop correlations, which is what's important. Now, you need some time. You need at least, I would recommend doing at least 12 weeks to develop, solid correlations where you can see that, when Ryan gets only 6 hours of sleep versus his normal 9, this is what trend you can expect. And this is what day should be the worst. Because a lot of times someone will not sleep the night before, and at training, they'll do fine that day.
Right. Yeah.
And then 2 days later, they have a big dip. Right. So anyways, what it really helps is it really helps me get buy-in, is because like when they feel like shit, I can let them see the stats. And the key is having good software that makes it easy for them to see what I'm talking about. That is the key. But those are the things. One thing I want to get is what is that company that looks at heart rate variability, DC brainwaves?
Yeah, it'd be a Megawave.
A Megawave. So I had that locked in when I first got there, and then I think they had some changes in the company.
Yeah.
And so now I'm going to work on that again, because that'd be a whole new level, I think.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, it's a Megawave is one of those things I've been fascinated with for friggin' God, almost since they started. Right. So years ago, I was doing some training through Z Health, and I talked to them a little bit about it. And then Landon Evans, when he was on the West Coast, God, probably early 2004, 2005, maybe, I was out there at an ACSM conference, and I was like, hey, is it okay if I just ask you questions about a Megawave? Like, tell me your price. He's like, well, you take me out to a good steak dinner, I'll answer any questions you want. I'm like, perfect. So I drive all the way out, like 3 hours at night, take him to this nice steak dinner. We had a great conversation. And basically he was like, I can't give you the details because I had to sign basically my life away saying that I'm not going to tell anyone, which I get.
Right.
And so like at 10:30 at night, he's like, but I can test you if you want. So at 10:30 at night, he takes me back to his place, like hooks me up like to the full system and stuff. I ended up leaving there, drive 4 hours back to like where I was staying. Yeah. And it was fascinating because I'm like, how how the hell does this thing predict what my VO2 max is by looking at electrical signals?
Yeah.
Right. And so for a while, I'm like, well, this would be an easy study, quote unquote, to run. So fast forward, like they've actually, the last couple of years have put out a lot more data than they ever have. The DC potential, I've used it. I have the kind of the coaching version since they've had that for years.
Right.
And I'll be damned if like the DC potential does, at least in my experience, appear to predict speed and power.
Wow.
Like pretty damn well. And like if I have tried to do stuff in the gym that's more speed intensive, just kind of brutalize my CNS if that's such a thing.
Right.
And like my DC potential will tank. Like the HRV on it, I can't ever get to move around much on myself. Maybe because my heart rate's kind of lower. Other athletes I've tested, like it tends to line up pretty good. So, you know, my good buddy Cal Dietz has got like the full system. My buddy Jim Snyder's got one. Landon still has his. You know, if you talk to all the Aaron Davis in Texas, I think I probably know like the people who use the full, like the 3 to 5 minute test. And like all of them are like, yeah, it works amazingly well. So I don't know.
To find out, you know, like I would love to take a deeper look. I was so excited because upon entry into the program and starting the new weightlifting program, I thought I had lined up, you know, GymAware and a Megawave, and I'm like, this is going to be so much fun. But then they just ghosted me. But I think they're talking now to our common friend Philip about working together with stronger experts. So I sure hope so. I would love to work with them.
Yeah, Hank Krajinoff is the other guy who's done a Megawave stuff for years in the Netherlands. Super crazy stuff. So yeah, and the last I heard, a Megawave was trying to be sold to someone. So I think that was kind of where there's a lot of weird stuff going on around that time too.
Like we were in total agreement to everything, and then ghost. And I kept messaging, and then I was like, I guess they don't want to talk. But like, I mean, I feel like I've done with GymAware, we've developed the best of relationships because of how much I write about them and everything. But I would love to try that with them. You know, in where I'm at in my career as a coach is that I have a few athletes that are at the absolute tip top. And so at this point, I need anything that will give me that last 0.5%.
Totally.
You know, that's the difference. It's the difference.
Yeah.
You know, a gold medal and like 4th place, no medals is so small, less than 1%. So
yeah.
Any edge.
And I think a Megawave has been interesting because even if so my bias, this is a guess. I think a lot of it may be entirely empirically derived. I think it's based on actual science and some of the Russian studies they did. But just think about the database of athletes and the amount of repeated data that they have. So even if it's all just correlated from doing measurements of athletes over decades to someone like yourself, that's still super useful, right? Yeah. Because if you could be like, hey, this guy's CNS is toast. Oh, wow, let's test him before the session tomorrow. He's still toast. Okay, his HRV might still be okay, right? And that's where I think it's interesting that if you have a CNS marker with those athletes that are kind of on the fringe, like maybe their RSI score is like, okay, not amazing, not horrible. HRV is okay. Their POM score, their other indicators are okay. But the CNS is like, no, he's trashed.
How do you think that
like, works? What do you believe then?
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. Like the DC potential appears to map in my experience and from other people I've talked to. Chris Morris, I think, is the guy who did his Ph.D. years ago on fluid periodization that used a Megawave, which was like one of the first times I actually had data published on it. And it showed to be pretty positive and quite a bit of a difference. But then like you go into literature, right? And you're like, okay, so let's say CNS fatigue is a thing. Well, what the fuck is it? Right? Are you looking at the studies where you've got the guy doing leg extensions and then they take the little coil and they stick it on the quad and they zap the quad to do more extensions and say that's your way of quantifying, you know, CNS versus peripheral fatigue? Because there's all these built-in like safeties in the system, right? Because we know like if you get on a leg extension, right, or biodex, and you just push as hard as you can till volitional fatigue, and I'm yelling at you and you can't do any more,
Right.
If I take an induction coil and set it on top of that muscle, it'll still fire.
Which means you had the potential.
Which means you had the potential, but then why are you not using it? Right. And then if you could, would your risk of injury just be like so sky high that it's not practical either?
Right.
But what is that kind of safety factor? Do they have 5 more reps, 10 more reps, half a rep? I don't know.
and like how close to each of those reps get you to injury, like
exactly.
So if you have 10, should you only do 5? Like, that goes back to what the book was saying. And in Endure is that, the brain shuts you down, even when, a peripheral, indications are you're good. Your brain's like, no, you're not, for whatever reason. So that's the mystery that I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've even seen with HRV scores where if they're really bad, like I don't worry as much about output, but I worry about injury risk because there's so much stress on the system that I'm like, if they get out of the session and they ended up doing okay, am I training like a different muscle activation pattern that's negative?
Right.
You know what I mean? Because I know that if you put a whole bunch of stress on someone who's not used to dealing with it, like their movement's probably not going to be quite the same. If it's an advanced CrossFit athlete, that's probably different, but it's powerlifter, Olympic weightlifter, just general person lifting.
That's a big importance. Right there. Yeah.
I don't know if I want to take that risk. So now, like if I have someone pop red, like on an athlete for HRV, almost all the time, I'm like, yeah, if you want to do a pump session, great. Go to the gym, do a pump session, leave, take a walk, go sleep, make some food. Like for me and the athletes I work with, this is not worth the risk.
Right.
What
do you monitor with your athletes? Obviously, HRV is a big one.
Yeah. So right now I just primarily use the iThlete for HRV. So they do it first thing in the morning, seated. I've got one guy who is obstacle course racer. He's doing it standing because his resting heart rate's like 36 at night sleeping. Which is insane.
Yeah.
So most are seated. And then I do have some athletes that have like an Oura ring. So I'll pull all their scores on Monday and look at that. Again, I'm just looking at like time in bed, like any differences and trends.
Sure.
I don't use the HRV a lot off of Oura because most of the people I have, their heart rates are relatively low, right? So you've seen like if you've got some parasympathetic saturation, right? The complaint I get with emails, people like, I got the Oura ring, bro. I'm doing my HRV and it never changes. I can brutalize myself and nothing happens. And I'm like, what's your resting heart rate? It's 39 at night. Okay, yeah, not much is going to change that, right? Because Oura is collecting HRV at night. They've got massive amount of parasympathetic saturation. So I'm like, just take an athlete and do it standing in the morning. So stand up, put the strap on, wait 1 to 2 minutes so your body reaches homeostasis, and then do the measurement. So that's the biggest thing I see. And then from there, I read other programs, but I try to get them to be a little bit more auto-regulatory, but I feel like initially I'm walking the fine line because I don't want to build up this like fragile mindset either. Like I have some higher level athletes where like we've been training them for, one guy's a power lifter, 6 months, he gets a red, he's 12 weeks out from a meet. And I'm like, go to the gym and test your, a soft 1 RM. Don't get injured, just see where you're at. He's like, what? You're crazy. Like my HRV is red. I'm like, how do you feel? He's like, okay, not horrible, not bad, but not wonderful. Perfect. Goes to the gym, sets like a, close to a new training max. He's like, oh, this is amazing. Great. Perfect. Right. Because I also want them to know that if you're kind of on that edge, and his average was great, right? So it was just a one-off day. It wasn't like a week that was in the trash bin. That if you pop red the night before competition, which you probably are going to,
all of
the day of,
sure,
because you're stressed, and especially if it's new, you're just like, hey, bro, remember that time we did that several weeks ago? What happened? I didn't feel so good, but I went to the gym and I got like good numbers. Perfect. You'll be fine.
Right. Because like when you say like heart rate variability, I feel like, when that gets off, which system is it going to, which system is going to suffer the most? Is it going to be, the anaerobic or, are you talking, because most of us, it's just the creatine system. So it's like, the phosphocreatine system, but like, so is it going to be affected if your, the heart rate variability shows stress? I don't know. What are your thoughts there?
I mean, if you look at the literature, you look at prediction of performance off HRV, like some of the endurance stuff is pretty decent, right? You
Right.
know, if your acute HRV is off, and I've noticed this with training too, is that endurance performance tends to suffer a little bit more. But if you think
Right.
about what a red or a high sympathetic HRV score says, it says that you're high on the sympathetic side, right? Like the worst thing I would want, especially for a power lifter where it's like a gross motor max output, is I would hate for them to be like super parasympathetic before a meet. And I've
Right.
goofed up people before and that's happened. And they're like, yeah, it's time for the deadlift. I want to go take a fucking nap in the corner. I'm
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
they were so parasympathetic that they couldn't transition to become sympathetic, right? So their break was so far stuck
Yeah.
that we just goofed the timing up. So I would much rather have them be sympathetic because I can control the amount of work that they're going to do to not bury themselves. So
Sure.
maybe just like take your lowest lift, like your deadlift, go hit a soft 1RM and then just walk out of the gym, right? Because they'll probably hit that performance. But if I tell them, bro, go to the gym and do like a marathon 3-hour session, I know that's going to be a fucking disaster.
And the next few days is gonna be terrible.
Yeah, the next week they'll probably have to
Yeah.
take a deload the next week.
Sure. Sure. So like how do you teach your athletes to like go, to flip that from from sympathetic to parasympathetic? Do you use breathing a lot? I know that's one thing I try to do with my athletes, but like
Yeah.
what are your thoughts there?
So I think like high level. So you're right. Olympic weightlifting, right? You remember like the super old Russian tapes you used to see of Olympic weightlifting, like back in the day, where
Yeah.
these huge sides of beef lumber out on stage, the heavyweights.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember seeing one. I don't remember the guy's name. I'm watching it, and it's all grainy and shit. And you're like,
Yeah.
this guy looks like he's gonna suck, but he's like the top lifter in the country. Like he looks like he's gonna fall asleep. The
Yeah.
second he touches a bar, it looked like he was going to fucking kill 7 people in a row. And then he clean and jerks, new world record, lumbers off stage like he's going to go take a nap. You're like, what? What did I just see? And what I realized was like, that's high level athletics, right? You watch a receiver run in the NFL, safety, whatever. They're doing amazing shit, but they don't ever look like they're trying hard. Like they don't make it, like the elite of the elite don't make it look difficult. So I think it's that toggling between parasympathetic. It's go time now. You are massively sympathetic of, which you can control, powerlifting more than Olympic weightlifting. And then you're back to being parasympathetic again. Right. So a good buddy of mine who works with a lot of NHL pros, he's like, the guys who enter the league who are massively sympathetic all the time, he's like, they perform great for about 2 to 4 years. And then they just blow themselves up. He's like, the guys who can perform and then like I've worked on a couple of his athletes and it's like that guy is an NHL pro. He's sleeping in the corner. But like when you tell him it's go time, like he's ready. Like, and we would test him. He was ready to, I'm like, he didn't do a warm up. He didn't do anything. He's like, yeah, I'm ready to go. When we test him, like everything's on. You're like, fuck, no wonder you make 4 million a year or whatever,
Right. Yes.
So I think you can train that though. So I think you can take someone sympathetic.
Yeah.
And then you look, okay, what are the levers I would use to drive them parasympathetic? So between ascent, I would tell them breathing, right? So get your breathing back to normal, nasal inhale, nasal exhale, longer exhale, right? Longer exhale will bias you more parasympathetic.
Right.
And then you can play with eye stuff, right? So wider panoramic view is more parasympathetic, right? Closer view is more focused sympathetic. So walk around, imagine you're just sitting, like try to have your gaze be a little bit more open. Walking has something called optic flow, meaning, right, your brain is trying to figure out, are you moving through the world or is the world moving through you, right? Because all the peripheral movement triggers with the proprioception to say, okay, I'm moving through the world. And that appears to be more on the parasympathetic side. So I'll tell them, like, if you're up to it, just walk around, get a drink of water. And then when you're ready to go again, now you want to transition up to become more sympathetic, right? So maybe sit, like I'll sit with my hands like this, and I'm just focusing on that point, and I'm just thinking of an external cue for the next lift, right? And I may do a couple of fast breaths before I do the lift, and then it's time to go. Focus on whatever your cue is during that lift. And the second you're done, like try to just bring your breathing back, get back to more parasympathetic again.
That's awesome. Yeah. You ever watch Ed Cohn, the great powerlifter?
Yeah.
He always seemed so relaxed.
Yes.
And when I transitioned from being the crazy guy to the relaxed powerlifter, I mean, that's when I became a world champion. Is when I looked at the world championships, the same as I did training in the gym. My perception is what I've lately is what I've learned the most. Perception of whatever it is the key. Is like perceiving the world championships is no big deal. Like lying to yourself until you believe it through visualization and self-talk. That was like a huge difference maker. And I never really got excited at all until the deadlift. Because that's the key. That's when you need that crazy man. Let's go. But until then, I was very calm. I was talking, relaxed, and it was the game changer. And most weightlifters who do the best are very relaxed. They're joking in the back when we're warming up. They're about to go onto the platform, and they're literally telling a joke as they, that is the guy who ends up being the best. And because his body takes it. Because I was the guy who literally outside of competition spent all my time in sympathetic because I could never calm down. I'd be laying in my bed thinking about wanting to win, and so my career lasted what you said about 4 years.
Yeah.
2001 it started. 2005 it basically ended because of that very thing. I blew myself up. So
yeah, and you see that in Ed Cohen's a perfect example, right? I mean, I don't even know if he had any major injury lifting. He had a few nicks and a few small things, but obviously he's had some stuff afterwards, but
only at the end of his career.
At the very end he just kind of said, that's it, I'm done. But that's the key, right? Especially in a strength sport or Olympic weightlifting where you've got a high skill and strength component. You have to have the ability to endure, and you just can't. I tell people, if I have a 3-cylinder Yugo, can I get to the grocery store faster if I redline it? Sure. Can I drive around town like I stole the car and expect it to last a long period of time? No, of course not. Right? Now, can you get more? Would I be better to upgrade the engine to a V6, a V8, a V12, and use less of the engine and get the same amount of performance for efficiency? That makes more sense, right? And then when it's go time, I have that reserve of power when I need it, and I'm probably not going to blow the engine at that point either.
Right. It's a brilliant, and Ed told me that, but at the time when he told me, he was my competitor too.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to
right
listen to him, but he was being my friend, and his career spanned 3 decades almost.
Yeah, crazy.
Mine didn't even last one. Mine lasted a half of a decade. And so for anyone listening, relax. Competition, that's a key.
Yeah. And you see that with some new athletes that come up, and you're just pick almost any sport, right? Hell, even pick bodybuilding, right? You see people come up and you're like, wow, look at that person. That's crazy. And you see the numbers and performance and everything else. And it just appears like the steeper that curve is up, the cliff on the other side, unfortunately, is just as steep. And you're like, what happened to them? They disappeared or unfortunately passed away, or, God knows what happened at that point.
That's exactly right. So with your athletes, with you monitor, I know HRV is obviously bigger. What else?
Mm-hmm.
What do you track with
so I use software like True Coach. We just track lifting volume. We track just performance, any other notes you want to put in there. Like I said, Aura will track, and that's about it, right? I mean, obviously they're tracking their macros and their nutrition, and that's really about it, because I found that HRV has a context in it. So athlete will say, self-report your energy, your nutrition, your sleep. And so I look at their score. So if they get a red score, right, the first thing I'm going to look at is a context, what's different. And they'll have a little notes section where they can leave me notes of, one guy a couple of years ago couldn't figure out what was going on. Everything was fine. He's like, oh, my dog passed away last night.
Sure.
Right. So HRV, obviously pretty horrible. Just take the day off. Don't worry about it.
Right.
And so I find that the context, like you were saying, that's the key. Yeah. The HRV tells me what's going on, and it gives them feedback on their own body. Because what I've realized, and this is a realization for myself years ago, most people, even high level training people, assume that other life stresses, that they're like different buckets. right? That if I'm super stressed out at work and I'm stressed out of my mind, that's not going to affect my performance. And then when they start measuring it, they're like, holy shit, that makes a huge difference. Wow, I never knew that. And you're like, yes. But them seeing it and seeing the numbers was different than me telling them. Right? Because I'm sure you run into the same thing. Like when I started, I was like, okay, I'm just for high level athletes, I'm only going to do HRV. And then I'm like, well, I'd like more data. So screw it. I'll just make everybody do it. I set known rules, whatever. Right. So for like 12 years now, everybody's been doing HRV. And what I realized was, if they're a high level athlete, I'm probably going to alter their training because they've done the recovery, they've done the things, they got sleep, they didn't go out till 3 a.m. in the bar. Right. It's the training that probably pushed them a little bit too far. Cool. But for people who have a lifestyle that's a life, they've got kids, they've got a job, that their lifestyle is probably the main thing that's kind of holding them back. They show up faithfully at the gym, they put in their half hour to an hour and a half, whatever. But I'm still probably going to alter their training because that is the most changeable thing in their life, right? Yelling at them and telling them like, bro, you just need to go to bed 2 hours earlier now.
Like,
that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah. When people tell me that, I laugh. I'm like, all right. I'll tell my 3-year-old to figure it out,
Yeah. Go brushing your own teeth, buddy.
Yeah. Right. So, we do have to be realistic. I think a lot of strength coaches, a lot of performance coaches miss that. It's like, there's what is perfect and then there's what's real. So we got to meet somewhere in between those two, so.
Have you found that athletes respond better to numbers than you just telling them something?
Oh, completely. I feel like
I wish someone would have told me that decades ago.
Me too. Me too. I spun a lot of wheels, by not collecting data. If I just done it, because it's so obvious. It's like you got the when you draw correlations, you can look at performance, you can look at the things that happen leading up to that performance and draw solid correlations. And it's just math. It's not my what I think. It's so funny too with young males. There comes a time where they're going to challenge their coach. Like if you start young, they'll be fine. They're going to get those teen years. It's going to start. And then when they hit the 18 to 21, they're going to challenge you. And so if you're not prepared to give them answers and to get buy-in, that's where you lose them. And so, my athletes, I've been with Matt since he was 10. I've been with one since he was, for 12 years, I've been with this athlete who I'm with now. The other one, almost a decade. Like I've been through these phases, and now we're to a new spot of like, they just complete buy-in, which is beautiful. But I had to do the work, to get the buy-in. So, we look at, I don't know, I didn't go through, when it comes to the data, we look at also volume, of course. We look at number of reps. You have to have number of reps to get a lot of these other variables I'm about to talk about. But we look at intensity, average intensity, relative intensity, and then we look at like things like a K value. We look at that. Ongoing.
What is a K value?
A K value, I'll tell you, it's my favorite. It's like a predictor. So if you can track your volume and your number of reps leading up to a meet, and then you get X result. Say you total 300 kilograms, and you're like, okay, in 6 months, I want to total 10 more. I want to do 310 on my total. So what K value is it's a fancy way of like figuring out. There's a little correlation that you can develop, and you can figure out what I need to average the next time. So I can, if I average 105, some random number, per rep, then I need to, at the same number of reps, average X or higher, so like, it gives you a quantifiable number now to shoot, because most coaches are just guessing. They're like, they got this result, so we'll do the same thing. I'm like, maybe not. If you're not careful, your average intensity, and hence, if you do the same amount of rep, if your average intensity doesn't change, then there's no way that any adaptation will happen. So you do need to track it. And we look at effect size. So I make sure that on any given day that I don't vary too much from the previous 7 days. And then we can look at the numbers acute to chronic. So I can make sure it doesn't vary too much from the last 21 to 28 days, whichever one you choose.
Right. So you're avoiding any load spikes, right?
Totally. We look at, if you probably already do this, I'm sure, but we look at monotony and strain. That's you know, that's an important one. Like a lot of coaches who like, you know, if you do the same thing day in and day out, like Bulgarian system, if you max out every day, most researchers are going to say that you're going to, whether it's, you know, you're going heavy every day with lower volume, or if you're going high volume, lower intensity, whatever, if it's the same every day, you're at risk of injury eventually. So, and performance probably will not improve as well as if you have a heavy day, a light day, moderate, high volume, low volume. You know, just, you know, that puts it simple, but just change your intensities and loading. And like Mondays we go super hard. You know, we do high volume. Tuesday is a light. Wednesday's moderate. Friday is like it's high intensity, moderate. So we change every single day, so we avoid any kind of monotony. And strain is simply looking at monotony with total volume. Monotony is looking at the change, you know, standard deviation, and then the other one is looking at total volume. So
yeah, because it's just like the issue you're running into is like, how do you get these dudes to lift a heavier load than they've ever lifted before? Right. So I know that like via the SED principle, they have to practice that, but they're not walking around with 100% capacity every day to do that. So what do I do that's a percentage less that's going to transfer to a heavier load? Right. But even if I do that all the day, I can't, you know, beat their nuts into the ground by doing 90% of the 1RM every day for hours on end either. No. So then what do I do to transfer to that?
Right. But like the key is start tracking. Like, you know, everyone, that's the biggest holdup. They're like, you know, they have all these questions. I'm like, stop questioning, just collect it. And then you can start looking and make decisions. You know, one problem I think is a bigger trend nowadays is you have coaches that have all this cool stuff and they're, you know, they're using it, but like to track but like, what are you doing is a key. Like, are you able to make a decision on a very daily basis? You know, otherwise, what are you doing? Like, we make decisions daily. When I see like, you know, a depth jump and it's 10% good, then I may make the decision to like, we're going to max out or we're going to go a little bit harder today. You know, if it's 10% below, like I told you, we're going to take it to the house. You know, we're going to do a little bodybuilding and go home. But like, you need to know what to do. That's a big key.
Yeah. And I've done even a little bit simpler method where I just track volume and intensity for lifts. I may do a little bit of density work. Right. And then I just look to see like, what's a transfer, right? So if I'm doing grip stuff, so I'm doing a Saxon pinch bar, did it the other day. If I get 155, I got 5 reps, which means that on a good day, I should probably now be able to hit 160 for a single, right? So for me, that transfer of 5 pounds is about 5 reps. For like an axle lift, it's different. It's sometimes closer to 7 or even, you know, 10 reps at a certain weight before I can jump up. So, but I know what it is, right? So I know that if I'm chasing just an acute volume at once, or I also know what is the total volume in a session, right? I may have to hit 40 or 50 reps in a session to then over time, a couple of weeks later, then bump up intensity again. The only way I know that is because it's for me and I have the data for my lifting. So I know that if, you know, hey, I didn't get anywhere close to a high percentage of 1RM today, but I did more volume on that lift than I've ever done before. Great. I know I'm making a positive adaptation towards my goal because I can't do the exact thing every day.
No, you have to make a strategic choice on a daily basis, in one direction or the other. Right. So in weightlifting, it's like, it's a chess match. You know, I'm pretty confident in powerlifting. I can get every powerlifter on earth stronger to a point, you know, where their genetic limitations catch up. But like in weightlifting, it's so interesting because, you know, like I can get them stronger. Their squats can go up, their pulls can go up, you know, all this stuff.
Lifts might not.
It might go down, you know, like it could very easily go down because, you know, if I spent all this time getting your squat and pull up, I didn't do enough time on, you know, snatching, clean jerking, that's the events. So it's a fine line there. And it's another thing we track, which leads me to the point is like, we look at efficiency ratings. So like, we look at like everything's based on the back squat. I mean, you could do it on anything. It doesn't really matter. You're looking at
just your anchor, right? It's
just anchor. Yeah. So then we're going to look at, you know, front squat compared to back squat, snatch, clean and jerk. All of it is related back. And we look at, you know, where are we inefficient? But, you know, all you can do is take your data from the past and come up with as close to what's efficient as possible. Some people, like a Nathan Damron, who has short femurs, the dude is going to squat a ton, and you're never going to get to that Russian beautiful number of X on this guy because he's going to squat 800 pounds. He's not going to clean and jerk 76% or 66% of that number ever. You know, so like what you do need to know is the individual, you know, efficiency. If a guy has been training 5 years under a coach such as myself, he's going to be an efficient lifter. He's going to snatch and clean jerk is going to look beautiful, you know. So, but his personal, you know, efficiency rating from back squat to snatch, that's what you got to know. Because then I got to look and see, well, you know, Nathan, who just is incredibly strong, he might very well have a 50-pound increase in the squat and zero.
Yeah,
it happens, you know. So you got to look at other variables. But there are people who are like who can literally clean and jerk what they front squat.
Yeah, that's guy, so wild.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. So that person just get them strong. But the key is just you got to know the variables. Yeah, you can't guess. If you're guessing, you're definitely losing in this era in America in weightlifting, because like all the coaches that are at the tip top now, it's a whole changing of the guard. Like every one of us is very good at collecting data and knowing what to do with it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's something I got from my buddy Cal Dietz. So he was saying that all his new programs he does with track athletes, swimming athletes, like he doesn't do them on his hockey players.
I love
because he's like,
yeah,
it's all timed. He's like, I know if they got faster, right? I maybe I made a hockey player, a female hockey player faster, but it's hard for me to tell, did I make her a better player? I gave her more capacity. I can show you that her lifts in the gym are better, but did that translate to make her a better player? He's like, I can tell you a sprinter right away if they ran faster or not.
Right. I know. It is very hard when you're training like a sport athlete, a football player, baseball player, to know what kind of impact, you know, that we can have. It's interesting. You know, there are variables, I believe, if you're good at biomechanics. I think there are certain variables that
definitely
I can quantify to see, look, I gave you the ability to swing your bat faster. I know that because, you know, I had the data, but you still got to hit the ball. So, yeah. That's up to you and your baseball coach. I'm not teaching you baseball, but you know, your angular velocity has improved. So go do something with it. You know what I mean? Like, anyway, I love biomechanics. But
it's interesting. Like I originally did my master's in mechanical engineering. So I suffered through kinematics, biomechanics, all that shit. Like initially I was going to do internal bone fixation was going to be my original projects, but I never got funding.
Yeah.
So I ended up having to go to the Center for Biomedical Engineering and ended up doing heat transfer stuff instead. So I had to go back and teach myself heat transfer from Thermo 2, heat transfer 1, conduction heat transfer. But I wish I would have stayed more in the biomechanics area to actually use it. But I'm glad I had, suffered through all the classes.
I love it. It's like something about biomechanics. It's like, I think the advantage of going back to school at my age, because I've been so involved in athletics and coaching high level athletics. Now, when I'm talking biomechanics, it like immediately in my brain, there's an image of an athlete doing what they're talking about. And I'm thinking to myself, what I could have done better. And so like, it just immediately, clicks. And I immediately take it back to my, my athletes and go to work with it. Big advantage, man. So I would say anyone listening, go coach for a while, then go back, and it'll be much better. Because I listen to my younger athletes who are in exercise science, and like they just don't get it yet. They, like I can hear the way they talk. They're going to biomechanics and they're just trying to survive. I'm like, you guys are missing the point. But they'll have to figure that out. I'm trying to teach them, but time, right? Like, yeah,
it's hard. Last question we'll wrap up is, you mentioned flywheels. My bias is that I just got one of the K-Box, shout out to Eccentrics. I didn't get any discounts from them, but I think they make high quality stuff. And the main reason I got it is I kind of wanted it for years, is that I don't do any Olympic weightlifting, but I know as I'm getting older, my rate of force development is going to drop off if I don't do anything. And for me, like kiteboarding is probably my main thing. And if I screw up a jump and get dropped out of the sky 20 feet like a sack of potatoes.
What did you say? You do what?
Kiteboarding.
Oh, okay. Kiteboarding. Wow.
Yeah. So if I'm up in the air and I screw up, the impact's a pretty high rate of force development.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought,
know what gravity is. Yeah.
Gravity thing still works. So I'm like, maybe I should just, as I get older, do something like that. And what I found was like with the flywheel stuff, it's, at least I like your opinion, is it was a good way of creating force in a safe way without worrying a lot about form. And I actually even noticed that getting a little bit, I don't know, soft or different with the form was actually better on a flywheel. Like I could get away doing a high pull on a flywheel and it felt pretty good. Where if I do it with a bar, I don't have the skill to do that. Where there was something about I have to exert force because it's pulling down. And then when I reverse, it's doing the opposite. So I have this constant force vector I'm working against versus a bar has, you know, all the different mechanics associated with it.
Right. So I think that the flywheel has got way more application than people even know. Here's what I'm going to say. I think you're totally right. My athletes that do it, normally I've saved it at this point because I only have one. Shout out to Kratos Kabuki. I love.
Oh yeah,
and he's coming out with one that's going to be even cooler because we're going to have ways to monitor velocity and he told me the variables. So now it's going to be even cooler for a guy like me because he's going to have some data points I can look at.
Yeah.
But let me give you some anecdotal evidence. I had two of my athletes, the one being the best athlete I've coached in my entire life, Ryan Grimsland. He's the one who like right now appears to be on track for the Olympics 2024, not only making it, but potentially medaling. So one of the strongest, most explosive guys in the entire world right now. I put him on that for 1 week. And so 1 week later, his vertical went from 37 inches to 40 inches. Ooh. Nothing else changed.
Wow.
No volume changes, no weight changes, nothing else changed. And there was a 3-inch increase. Well, then I started putting more and more people, and I've noticed the exact same trend. It's been crazy, which the key is how you do it, you know, because like, you know, you can just do it. Like you guys like us can do it and you can get hypertrophy. I think it's hard to beat the, you know, the flywheel for hypertrophy simply because you got the speed of the eccentric, which a lot of people don't talk about, which has got there's a high correlation to the speed of the eccentric and hypertrophy, especially, you know, faster twitch fibers. And so doing that, the key would be the way we do it is we find ways to overload the eccentric portion. So like you could do a 2-leg, you know, a bilateral like RDL, and then switch the eccentric to a unilateral RDL.
So it's like a 2-1 type thing is what I call it.
Yeah. That has been the big difference, you know, because, you know, we're thinking I need to improve, especially the hip, knee, and ankle, you know, joints. I need to, you know, make those joints more elastic. And so it has been a miracle so far. So like anyone listening, I would probably at least look deeper. The key would be in the way you use it. Anyway, so yeah, I love it. I can't wait to get the new one where I can get, you know, some more quantifiable data points versus right now, all I can tell you is like, you know, we just did X sets for this long.
Right.
Like, who knows how much, you know, force or power
or speed.
Right. I have no idea, but soon I'll be able to put down on that and I can have way more than just anecdotal evidence. But like, it's been really cool. Even like the RSI, everybody that did it, their RSI score went up. And you're talking about high level weightlifters. So like to have any kind of change.
Oh yeah. It's huge.
Yes. Well, what you got to think about is the elasticity, because like eccentrically, especially, you're looking like Titan, you know, the protein filament that's like responsible for it, not solely.
One of them, we think.
One of them, right? We think, right?
Yeah.
So like, all I can say anecdotally is that something with the flywheel, that speed of eccentric, there's a big difference, and especially for weightlifting, it was a huge difference for the one guy that who was the highest level I've ever coached, which is even, as you know, more dramatic.
Yeah.
If it was a rookie, I could do anything. He gets better.
Yeah.
This guy, it opened my eyes. So like the flywheel, if you don't have one, you should definitely at least be looking into it, I think.
Have you seen the new, I think it's from 1080 Sprint, the machine they have that looks like a Smith machine that's programmable with all rates of force development and everything?
No, but you can bet I will for sure look it up.
Yeah, but again, shout out to Cal Dietz has one, so I got to try it.
He gets all
And
the toys, man.
I know I was asking him
Yeah.
like, that's pretty cool. Like, how much is that? He's like, about 50,000. I'm like, nope, not putting that in my garage.
Hell no. Like, no, man. My weightlifters are broke. I'm not doing that. But if I can like work a deal with a $50,000.
Tell me you need to do research on it.
I will. That's all I got for him. But tell me what it is from who again?
So have you seen the 1080 Sprint?
I know that one. Yes.
Yeah. So same company, but they took the concept and they applied it to what looks like a Smith machine. Right. And what's cool is you can program completely independent concentric and eccentric. Yeah. I think it might be electromagnetics. I'm not sure how it runs.
Right.
So like you could do a very slow eccentric.
Yeah.
You could do a fast eccentric and have it stop at a certain point. You could have it do resisted concentrics, and it gives you all of the data and the feedback. So you could have it be more quote unquote open-ended where, okay, do a very slow eccentric and now create as much force as you can concentric, and it'll measure how much force was created.
I would definitely spend a lot of time. Well, the key is like if you have an athlete who's not very elastic, I would definitely spend time on the eccentric
yeah, like triphasic. Yeah.
Right. Which is, I think Cal Dietz is really the one who put me on this journey I'm on. Once I read his book, Triphasic Training, all of us, none of us ever like does exactly. We all got our their own thoughts, but it definitely led me to start looking at those individually. And we definitely look at eccentric, concentric, isometric apart from one another at phases, at certain phases, But anyway,
cool. Yeah. So where can people find out more about you? I appreciate all your time today.
You can go to Master Elite Performances, or masterelite.com is our website. You can go to Master Elite Performance on Instagram, but I really enjoy talking to people on Twitter because it's kind of small.
You still use Twitter?
I do, man. Like, I love it, especially if there's a lot of strength coaches on there. So it's like, it's an audience that, that's the people I'm working with. So I get on there and we have very to the point conversations, mainly about all these things we just talked about, athlete monitoring, getting people strong, exciting stuff like that. That's on Twitter. It's at Master Elite.
Great. And you do online programming for athletes then too through the company also, if people are interested?
Yeah, me at masterelite.com. And we are making a transition, not away from that, but the focus is going to be more on courses, like teaching coaches, what I really want to do is I want to make the science easier to, discern the information and how to apply it to these coaches because they're already overwhelmed. You take a high school coach, he's coaching 100 athletes a day, and then you're saying, hey, you need to learn physics and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just going to take the stuff that he needs to know, make it digestible and applicable. So that's the focus of our company now. So
yeah. And you also have a course through Stronger Experts or Buddy Phil?
Weightlifting, and I plan on working on an athlete monitoring course. Everything we talked about, trying to make that information easy. There's a course at Lenore Ryan University called athlete monitoring. It's unbelievable, but you gotta pay this exorbitant thousands and thousands for this course, so I'm going to try to make it at a better price point and easier to digest. Take out all the stuff that I didn't need and leave the stuff I did. And so that is what's coming next is athlete monitoring.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all your time today, and enjoy the Arnold. Good luck to all your athletes there. And again, really appreciate the time. I learned a lot, and thank you for sharing so much with all the people listening too. I'm sure they really appreciate it, which is great.
Are you going to the Arnold?
No, unfortunately, I'm not. We've gone the past. Well, we haven't gone in the COVID years, but we went a couple of years before, and it's always fun. Like, I like it, but at the same point, I only go if I know people there are competing, and like I stay out of the expo on Saturday, and it's fun just to see people. But once you've been to the Arnold multiple times, like it's kind of the same unless athletes are competing and stuff. And the last year I was down there, my buddy Ben Pekulski called me on Saturday. He's like, hey, just want to come down and do a podcast and just hang out? We're like, sure. So we just went to his Airbnb, did a podcast, hung out with him Saturday afternoon, and avoided the expo. No one I knew was competing. We saw him compete in the morning, and so it's fun, but it's not going to make it this year.
We just have a lot competing, or I definitely would not go. So
Yeah.
it's crazy. That expo is like makes me panic. Yeah. So.
Yeah. I remember one year I had to do a talk for the NSCA there, and I gave myself a half hour to get from one end of the expo across upstairs to where the room was.
And were you late?
And I thought I was going to have like more than enough time. And I'm like trying to, it was Saturday, and I was an idiot, went in there, got stuck on the other side. And it took me 25 minutes to get to the room. I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, man. It's insane. It's like 300,000 people in that convention center. It's like the population of Columbus, Ohio increases 300. I don't know what it will be, because this is the first one since COVID. So
yeah, probably be a little bit less, but in the past, that's definitely what it's been.
Yeah, I hope we don't. It's going to be a super spreader event. Exactly.
Yeah.
But, I mean, not me. I just had it a few weeks ago, so I'm good now. But
okay, so you'll be
the rest
fine.
of the world.
The rest of the world, look out.
Yeah, you're screwed. Yeah, the whole world's screwed, but I'm good. But anyway, all right, man. Yeah,
awesome, man. Thank you so much. Have a good time.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. This was fun. And any questions, anything I can help you out with in the future, let me know. Appreciate it.
I'm sure I will be reaching out. Thank you.
Cool, man. Thank you so much. We'll see you.
See you, Mike.
Big thank you to Travis for taking all the time today to talk. Really thankful for him and all of his input. Super excited for all the work that he's doing on monitoring there of very high-level athletes, which is exceedingly rare in the literature. I mean, I've done and published work on exercise testing, energy drinks, etc., but that was with recreational athletes. And mainly it was because I didn't have access to high-level athletes. If I went over next door and talked to my buddy Cal Dietz and said I wanted to borrow 16 weeks of his high-level athletes and divide them into two groups and do some crazy customized training, he would tell me to go get lost, which makes perfect sense because his job is to take those athletes and get the highest results possible safely in the shortest amount of time. His job is not to help me finish my Ph.D. at that time. So it makes sense that having a dearth in high-level athletics, unfortunately, is more common. So it's great to see more data being created by Travis and some other people I know out there looking at high-level athletes. And I think the greatest area that we'll be looking at that will be primarily monitoring, because that allows you to not necessarily make wholesale changes to their program, but still get more information about how to effectively train them. So big thanks to Travis. Check out all of his stuff there. You can also find him on the Barbell Shrugged podcast with my good buddies Anders and Doug. So I always enjoy listening to that podcast too. And this podcast itself brought to you by Physiologic Flexibility. The PhysFlex cert will open again in early April 2022. Go to physiologicflexibility.com to get on the wait list and the newsletter to be notified as soon as it's open. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with some friends. Leave us whatever stars you feel is appropriate and a nice little review, because that helps us out a ton in the old iTunes ranking. And then also subscribe and download it. Thank you so much. Again, really appreciate it. I know you've got a ton of other podcasts and things coming at you to listen to. So I really appreciate your time to listen to this one. And we will talk to you again next week.
Boo! Boo! That was the worst thing I ever heard. It was terrible. Horrendous. Well, it wasn't that bad. Oh, yeah? Oh, there were parts of it I liked. Yeah, I liked a lot of it. Yeah, it was good. It was great. It was wonderful. Oh, bravo. More!